This is ContraZoom, where we go back and forth about film. I'm your host, Dakota Arsenault. It has become a yearly tradition to have a fun episode where I name my favorite movies by category to celebrate my birthday. In recent years, I name my favorite films by genre, language, through the decades, and more. Joining me this year for a fourth time is my own personal birthday present, Bil Antoniou, the host of the Bad Gay Movies and Riviera Rats podcasts, two of my favorite shows. Welcome back to the show, Bill. How are you?
I'm good, Dakota. How are you?
I am excellent. So we are recording this a week and a bit before my actual birthday, but this will come out just after. So I don't have any news on if anyone wants to know how my birthday went. I can't say yet. I imagine it was a delightful time, other than the fact that I know I'll be working on the actual day.
Oh, well, I've done that. It's not that bad. But happy birthday all the same.
Thank you. Thank you
And,
from the
and thank
future.
you for making me your birthday present. It's an interesting way for my life to have turned out. Let me just put it that.
I wouldn't have it any other way, frankly.
Oh. My birthday present is usually to see what I can get a straight guy to do for money in a dark club, but hey, you do whatever you want.
Yeah, I'm not even
Yeah.
paying you for this.
See? I'm the dumb one in the room after all.
um, Last year on episode 282, Best Films by Genre Part 2, I named my favorite thrillers, epics, westerns, and more. And this year we're going more regional in naming our favorite films by 10 cities. While I reserve the right to make the list more international on a future episode, since I think I'm running out of ideas for future years, to be honest, I decided to keep this list at a North American cities only today because I fear that the list would look a little too similar to our list from episode 243, Best Films by Language, as I imagine stuff like La Dolce Vita and In the Mood for Love would
Right.
likely be near the top of a Rome and Hong Kong list, respectively. Does that make
So
sense?
that's what I was wondering about this because I thought you just went by a I don't know, some kind of internet research on what are the 10 most filmed cities in the world, and I guess it doesn't surprise me if they're all American, but yeah, North American I should say.
Yeah. But yeah, like I said, I picked 10 North American cities, 8 American ones, and 2 Canadian that I believe had the most films to choose from to make an interesting list. And they
All right.
are New York, Chicago, LA, Boston, San Francisco, Washington, D.C., Las Vegas, Philadelphia, Toronto, and Montreal. But before we get into our individual lists, I am curious about your thoughts on the cities I chose and sort of the quality of options you thought you had.
Well, it just made me realize how many movies I love that I didn't never really thought of where they were filmed. So I did my best to choose films that it's not just that I love the movie, but that the city is kind of a character
Mm.
and where its presence is very much a part of what makes the film iconic.
Yeah, and I believe I approached the list in the same way.
Hmm.
Um, it's one of those things where, like you said, where the city has to sort of play an integral part. So I'm looking at a list of best movies set in New York City or Chicago or LA or whatever, and a lot of them, not all of them, but like there'd be a large chunk of them where it would be one location inside a house or something like that. And like
Right.
it's probably my favorite movie on the list out of all the options if I could choose, but it didn't. That could be set anywhere. It didn't feel like that city was a character. It didn't feel like the fact that it was in New York versus Boston made a difference. All that sort of stuff.
Yeah, or I mean, I was looking. I would do look at lists of films shot in whichever city, and some of them, I guess, a lot of it takes place in that city, but I don't think of it as being associated with that. Like A League of Their Own is considered a Chicago movie,
Mm.
but I mean, they go all over the country. I guess a lot of it takes place in Chicago, and also because of the final game. But like, I don't know that Chicago is a really a big part of it, except for maybe Chicagoans who watch it.
Yeah. I guess that would
Yeah.
be my next question is, did you look at films that were basically almost entirely or completely based in the cities, or were you considering films where there was maybe a major set piece that took place in one of the cities on the list, but the bulk of the film maybe took place somewhere else?
I was open to the latter, but I think I ended up choosing mostly films where it all takes place in that city because because like I said, I was looking at movies where the location is a, a major part of the fabric of the story, and yeah, I guess ultimately I chose movies that took place entirely there. I think, I don't know.
And looking at my list specifically, I also didn't do any period pieces because one thing that when I was looking at the list of available movies to pick from, I
Hmm.
think representing the city the way it looks in its moment in time was something that was important for me in crafting this list. So there's
Okay.
some phenomenal period pieces, but oftentimes it would be like, oh, and then I think of something like Zodiac. I love that movie
Hmm.
so much, but so much of that city is green screen because San Francisco doesn't look like that anymore.
Right.
So I didn't consider it eligible, even though that movie is so based in that city and it is so integral to the
Okay.
plot.
I think I have some exceptions to that, but we'll find out.
Yeah. Not that like you can obviously include you're forced to not include that, but that was just something that I was looking at, and I think it was just sort of a subconscious thing when I was comparing the movies. I was like, oh, which one do I prefer better? And it sort of came
Hmm.
down to which film was authentically representing the city at the time the movie takes place. I've got a couple films where I think they take place a little bit earlier, but not
Okay.
necessarily like, it took place 50 years ago, something like that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. But yeah, so the way this is going to work is we each have a main choice, which we will talk about, and then we're going to briefly mention our sort of runner up pick that sort of also is one that we considered for various reasons. But obviously, we will keep the runner up pick thoughts brief. So
Yes.
yeah. I'm really excited to talk about these. I think I have a really good list. I think it's one of those things where I think there's some cities we might have some overlap just because the quality of options was a bit lower for some of them. But I am very, very excited to see what you pick for especially some of the bigger cities.
I have one in particular that I would bet money we're going to have an overlap on, but I'm going to wait to see if I'm right.
All right. And then the last thing, I know it's something we're going to get into, but how much did you find that looking at the different cities and sort of realizing certain genres or types of movies are much more associated or prevalent with those cities. Like, I'm not going to reveal anything, but when I say Washington D.C., obviously political
Right.
movies seem to be the most common occurrence there.
Yes, and political thrillers in
Yes.
particular. But what I found interesting is that most movies that are associated with cities are romantic comedies.
Mm. Okay.
Because a big part of a romantic comedy is like filming people going on dates in real places,
Mm-hmm.
especially the romantic comedies of the 90s and 2000s. So I found that very interesting.
Interesting. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. Because
Uh,
you have to have like a lovely love scene on a famous landmark, right?
Yes, yeah, you see the
Yeah.
skyline, you're maybe
Right.
in the biggest tower in the city, something like that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm very excited to see what you come up with. You always have excellent picks
Oh,
that
thanks.
often school me in my shame for not seeing all of them.
Well, it's you who feels schooled, by the way. It's not me schooling you.
As I always say on this show, even when you're not around, you are the largest encyclopedia knowledge of film person that I know. So I know you will always bring the best picks.
Well, that's kind of you. Thank you.
Let's get started with New York City. So this is an interesting one. New York City, very very large city. You've got the 5 different boroughs, so there's a ton of
Hmm.
different ways you can represent it. And of course, oftentimes when you're talking about New York City, that often includes parts of New Jersey or maybe
Hmm.
a little bit further north of the city, things like that. So there's a whole different ways you can look at New York City as a filming locale. But
Hmm.
what is your runner-up and pick for NYC?
Well, piggybacking on that thought, I mean, you could have done five different categories of movies iconically associated with each borough. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I made a decision to basically just go with Manhattan because that's the most New York of New York, but, I could do a Brooklyn category too.
Yeah.
Um, but for my New York picks, and I mean, for anyone who hasn't ever been to that city, the three of you out there, it's a must. I mean, it's probably the American city most associated with the movies other than LA. And when you go there, it looks just like it does in the movies. It's incredibly magical that way. My runner-up is Working Girl by Mike Nichols, one of my favorite movies, a movie that I have to finish it if it's on TV, even though I have the DVD, primarily because of the opening credits are so iconic, but also, it's about Wall Street in New York, and it's so charming. But my number one pick is automatically going to get me canceled because, we have a few directors who are most closely associated with New York filmmaking. Martin Scorsese would be one of them. I'm not straight enough to pick him. So I'm going to go with the other now notorious New York filmmaker, one Woody Allen, from back in the days before he was notorious, around the time I discovered him, which is my favorite film of his, 1986's Hannah and Her Sisters, which I believe is his best. It is the story of Hannah and her sisters, her two sisters, and their various entanglements of their lives, their love lives, their marital lives, their aspirations. It examines them over the period of a year, so you get to see New York in 4 different seasons. The city looks incredibly beautiful, and you see a lot of cool neighborhoods. Barbara Hershey's character in particular lives, I believe, in Soho in that movie. And if you walk through that part of the city that she lives in now, you don't recognize it from this film. It has changed so incredibly much. Because her partner, Max von Sydow, lives in this like artist's loft that's in the middle of all these pretty much derelict buildings. So yeah, I think it's one of I know everyone always chooses Manhattan from 1979 as the most New York of his movies, but for me, it's this one.
Nice, yeah. You're starting off strong. 2 movies I have not seen. I've only seen a few
Oh,
Woody Allen films, but I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. Where for the longest time, internationally on film at least recognized, New York was represented by 2 sides of the coin of being Scorsese and Allen, because the 2 of them
hmm
showed the sort of the darker side and the lighter side of the city.
yeah.
So yeah, excellent choices there. And yeah, you probably could have picked one of 50 different Woody Allen films because they're basically all set in New York.
Up until the late 2000s when it got too expensive, and then that's why he started writing like Match Point and Vicky Cristina Barcelona. All these European cities were inviting him to film there, so he would just adapt his scripts to be set there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And then the other funny thing to sort of consider is so often we're talking about films being filmed in the city. Toronto is often New York, so that's something we have to be
Yes.
aware of.
Yeah. Which is also special with him because his movies were always actually shot there. But yes,
Yes.
Toronto is often used. In Moonstruck being a movie I almost came close to picking. Most of Moonstruck is shot here.
Mm.
Yeah.
So for my picks, my runner-up is the only documentary I have on this list,
Oh.
and that is Paris is Burning,
Oh yes.
which, if anyone has not seen it yet, it's sort of a look at the drag ballroom culture in New York City, and I believe it was the early '80s is when the film came out, but does a
Early 90s.
early '90s, yes, sorry,
Yeah.
does a great job.
It's set though. I mean, I think she filmed it over a few years, but yeah.
Right. Yes. Does a great job showing what the gay community was like in New York at that time.
Hmm.
And then my actual pick is Midnight Cowboy, the John Schlesinger film. It's one of those things where so often we hear about how dirty and grimy and gross, especially the Times Square area was for a large
Hmm.
portion of the history until Giuliani came in and you know, uh, cleaned up the neighborhood, depending on what choice of words you wish to use, and
Yeah.
basically completely gentrified and corporatized Times Square specifically to become the tourist destination we know now. But I
Yeah.
remember the first time I watched Midnight Cowboy, and I was like, oh, this is what they mean by talking about how dangerous and dirty and grimy that area of New York City is. And it just doesn't feel like a real place. Like it feels like it should be a set, but it's real.
Yeah, that movie is incredible. And I mean, Hannah and Her Sisters is only 17 years later and it still hasn't been cleaned up, quote unquote, cleaned up yet. That happens a few years later. So you're seeing the sort of aftermath of that. Midnight Cowboy is also really impressive because it's such a hard movie, but it has this very tender relationship at the center of it that I
Mm.
always find really affecting. and it's very beautiful in its ugliness. There is a glamorousness to it. It's considered the movie that made the Andy Warhol aesthetic mainstream.
Yeah, and that's sort of another era of New York filmmaking is the Warhol stuff that was going on, Kenneth Anger,
Sure.
that sort of art pop era, and they were not showing the sort of same stuff that Midnight Cowboy is showing. Obviously, it's similar neighborhoods, but a very different look at them. Here,
Hmm.
we're seeing what life on the streets was like for these two hustlers, and it's very interesting. If people have not seen it yet, I think that it's still a very worthwhile film to check out, especially as a time capsule for New York in
Hmm.
the late 60s.
For sure.
All right, well, let's move on to our next city. We're going over to the Midwest now, to Chicago, Illinois.
A city I've still never visited.
Oh, it's a great city. I love it. I've been there a few times. It's very much like Toronto in size and cultural things to do, all that
Hmm.
sort of fun stuff that we love about Toronto. It's what Chicago is like too.
I've heard everyone who goes there loves it. My runner-up choice is Nicholas Ray's Party Girl, starring Sid Charisse and Robert Taylor. This is a really great movie. It's made in the '50s, so it was probably all shot on sets in LA. But Chicago tales are usually associated with things like gangland sagas and city corruption. That's usually a story when it's set in Chicago. And this one is about she's basically a sex worker, but in this era, she's a quote unquote party girl. She gets hired to be pretty at parties, and she hooks up with a mobster. Anyway, I won't go into it because it's my runner up, but it's a great film. The musical Chicago is also emblematic of this idea of Chicago as this gangland paradise, and Some Like It Hot as well. But my number one choice is one of, I think it might be my only rom com that made it to number one. I can't remember. But it's one of my favorite rom coms. It's Return to Me by Bonnie Hunt from 2000. She is a very proud Irish American Chicagoan who directed this film. I don't know if she ever directed anything else, but she did a bang up job with this one. I went and saw this movie like twice in a row in the theater, 2 days in a row. It's the story of a happily married man who loses his wife. He's played by David Duchovny. He loses his wife in a car accident. She's played by Jolie Richardson. Her heart is donated to a woman who has heart problems, played by Minnie Driver, who later meets David Duchovny and they fall in love. And it sounds like a really cheesy plot, but it's actually done with a great deal of humor and wit. There's a marvelous supporting cast led by Carol O'Connor as Minnie Driver's grandfather, who runs an Irish Italian pub slash restaurant. My mom actually really loved this movie. When I showed it to her, she made me put it on like 5 nights in a row. So this movie is pure charm, and Chicago is a big part of its setting as well.
0 for 4 now, Bill.
Oh,
Wow.
wow.
It's starting off real strong here. That sounds delightful. And that's something I feel like Chicago, that side of it, is not shown enough.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're right, there's so much of it, of Chicago films, are based on, crime thrillers, gangster
Yeah.
mob sort of stuff. It's sort of like the cousin to New York City in that way. But yeah, there is a real, quite a few films sprinkle in these scenes of real delightful whimsy that I don't think get enough recognition.
Yep.
For me, my runner-up, I am going to go with one of those crime films that we were just talking about, and that is Michael Mann's Thief.
Oh,
I love this film about a safe cracker played by James Caan. Such a great film. We get to see some really cool shots of the streets and things like that I really like. That's another thing about Chicago is they've got the L train, which
yep.
always looks good on camera.
Yeah, I came close to picking this one. I just don't associate it with Chicago.
Yeah, that's fair. It doesn't
Yeah.
feel as much. I think it's not screaming Chicago. It's
Right.
subtly saying Chicago.
Yeah. But it is good. I mean, it's a stunning movie. And it's his first, I believe.
I think it was like his first proper theatrical film. I think he had a
Okay.
couple TV films that ended up getting released, but this
Okay.
was like his first like big one.
All right.
But my actual pick is it's probably as close to a documentary as I'm gonna get again, and that's the Blues Brothers. I just adore this film. So much about Chicago is the music there, the soul, the R&B, the jazz, all of that music that just emanates from Chicago as a whole, and I don't think a movie does it better than John Landis's Blues Brothers, showing you all the, iconic images of the city and iconic, singers and musicians from the city as well.
Now I'm going to blow your mind, Dakota.
What's that?
I've never seen it.
Oh
I
my
know.
goodness.
I've never seen this movie.
Oh, wow.
I have a few weird holes in my pop culture sort of experience. A lot of it's because there are a lot of movies that last because there's a popularity with them, and you've seen them because your friends make you watch them.
Mm-hmm.
I was always the friend who made people watch things, so if I didn't get around to it, I didn't see it.
That's completely fair. It's
Yeah,
got a very iconic Carrie Fisher in it,
I
toting a
know our
gun.
Lord and Savior Carrie Fisher, and I try to
Yeah.
watch all her stuff, and I've never seen it.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
Very interesting. I'm
yeah,
glad to have one up on you. I feel like I did something good here. And of all
yeah.
things,
Enjoy
it's
it
the
while it
Blues
lasts.
Brothers. um. All right. Well, let us move over to Los Angeles,
Hmm.
probably alongside New York, the city on this list with the most options,
Yeah,
because you have things like movies about the Hollywood industry, which I'm sure I know at least one of my picks is going to have. I'm not going to spoil which one it is.
hmm,
But then you also have this whole side of it of the formation of Los Angeles
hmm.
basically starting out as like a criminal enterprise, sort of like Las Vegas in that regard, where there was just
Yeah,
so much corruption steeped in it. So we get so many great crime thrillers as well. And because that's where the entertainment hub is located, it's sort of easy to be like, oh yeah, this movie just takes place in LA because it takes place in LA because we're
for
here.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, what are your picks?
I mean, there's a wealth of choices, and on a different day, I could probably have gone with about 6 or 7 different ones. You and I usually do our best to not repeat from previous episodes,
So no
so
LA
that
Confidential.
automatically, LA Confidential is discounted, even though that would have been a pick had this been my first time on your show.
Yes.
My runner-up is actually a movie that encompasses a lot of these picks, which is my only documentary on this list, which is Los Angeles Plays Itself by Tom Anderson from 2003. This is a scintillating 3 hour documentary that you can watch on Canopy that is footage from movies filmed in and set in Los Angeles over the many years that movies have been made, in which he puts together this sort of cultural history of the city and gives you information about history, politics, and everything in between through the way Los Angeles is depicted in cinema. Sometimes it's just about geography and how people sometimes magically go from one end of the city to the other through editing
Yeah.
because of the way the locations are chosen, that sort of thing. It is fascinating, and it is so much more than its description would lead you to believe. He made it in 2003. It was highly, highly critically rated, but I think it didn't get released properly until about 10 years later. And I think that's because he probably made it before he got the rights for all the footage that he uses in it, because he's like a professor.
Mm.
But it's available on Canopy now, and it is incredible and an absolute must see. And there was a Toronto version made called Dead Ringer a few years ago. I can't remember the director's name, that I saw at Casa Loma. That was mentored by Tom Allison and was also really good. And because, of course, it's Canadian, you can't find it anywhere to save your life. Anyway, so that's my runner up. I'm sorry, I took too long with that one. My number one is Who Framed Roger Rabbit by Robert Zemeckis, in part because that's the movie that sort of formed my idea of what Los Angeles is, which, when you know what that movie is insanity. But it's what I think of when I think of LA, even though I do have LA Confidential, Chinatown, and a billion other movies to think about. Roger Rabbit in particular is so iconic because it's a film noir for kids. It has the plot of a film noir, as complicated as The Big Sleep, but it factors in, the movie business and specifically animation. It's this like groundbreaking combination of animation and live action that has rarely been equaled, particularly in terms of the strength of storytelling against the technology. And then, of course, film noir is a very iconic LA genre and mainly because most film noirs were very low budget. And so it was just cheaper to film everything in the city you were already making movies in
Mm-hmm.
than to set it anywhere else. So that is my pick. It's a film that I still love after all these years. I think it was like the first VHS tape I ever bought, in case anyone's wondering how old I am. It was the first I ever bought with my own money. And I know it entirely off by heart.
Amazing. Yeah, Los Angeles Plays itself has long been on my watch list. I've heard nothing but incredible things about it.
Yeah, but it's also one of those movies that stays on your watch list forever because you're like, do I feel like doing this tonight? And the answer is usually no.
You got me there.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I
you're
had Blue
absolutely
is the Warmest Color on my shelf on DVD for 10 years before I finally watched it. So I know
wow.
what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And everything you said about Who Framed Roger Rabbit is absolutely right. It's also one of those films that like I find the more I learn about it and like learn how they filmed it and the history behind it, everything that went
Hmm.
on behind the scenes, the more impressive of a movie it is because you're just
Oh,
like,
yeah.
how did they get away with all this stuff? How do they do all this stuff? Like right down to like literally the number of frames had to be counted to be shared equally between what was it, Disney and someone else. I can't
That's
remember
right.
the Looney Tune stuff. So that way, no one company got more a more prominent feature in the film. Like
Yeah.
crazy stuff like that.
Yeah, and Robert Zemeckis is famous for the fact that his movies push technology forward every time he makes one.
Hmm.
But he rarely equals it with storytelling strength the way he does in this film.
Yes, yes,
I
I
also
would
used to
agree.
play the NES, like in the 1980s version of the Nintendo video game,
Hmm.
like constantly as a kid. And I have a feeling that when I go to LA, I'm going to expect it to look like those graphics from back in the day.
Yeah.
Just like endless rows of empty warehouses and a big yellow cab.
Of course, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And tunnels that disappear, all
Yeah.
that fun stuff. So my runner-up film is definitely probably one of the weaker ones on my list as a whole, but I think it highlights a really different aspect of a city than the rest of my list really represent, and that's Sofia Coppola's The Bling Ring.
Oh, yeah.
I have a soft spot for this movie. I know a lot of people don't care for it, but you know this is about a group of high schoolers who break into rich people's homes
Hmm.
and you know moonlight as them and then steal their jewelry and expensive items. So we see like the inside of Paris Hilton's real house. They break into Rachel Bilson's house. There's some other Lindsay Lohan's house. I think they break into things like that. But they actually filmed at Paris Hilton's real house,
Yeah.
which is so interesting. And it's one of those things where like we talk about the rich and famous aspect of LA, but we rarely actually see it on film. And so this is one of the few movies to actually highlight that.
Yeah, I enjoy that movie. I don't think it's impressive, but I find it entertaining. I
Hmm.
remember enjoying it. Yeah, and it is very LA.
Yes.
The
Uh,
culture, the celebrity culture that it covers, is very LA.
In
Yeah.
a way that we don't see very often.
Yes. Yeah.
But my actual pick, even though it mostly takes place on a studio lot, sort of
Hmm.
similar to your film, is studio based, and that's Singing in the Rain.
Oh,
Like it's you can't talk about LA and not talk about movies, and that's Singing in the Rain. And I have such a funny story about this. The first time I watched it, I was just not very impressed with it. I was like, yeah, this is fine. And then I rewatched it a couple years ago. I saw it with a live orchestra, and I was just like, Dakota, you are one dum dum. This is a 5 out of 5 masterpiece. I get what everyone loves about it.
it is really good. It's incredibly beautiful, and it still glows. You know, when you watch it, it still has a zing to it. Sometimes I get annoyed when one movie from a really big genre is picked by everyone as their favorite because it kind of makes me think that no one's bothering to watch everything.
Hmm.
But even though I might, if I did a full and proper survey, maybe it's not the one that I would choose. I think it's an apt choice for people to pick as a favorite. And you know, in terms of movies about Hollywood, it doesn't have movies that took place in show business, especially in the 40s and 50s, were always very aspirational, and they were always about the fact that you could just show up in LA and all your dreams could come true. And that
Hmm.
movie has a lot more acerbic bite to it in a way that would we become much more used to later on.
Yes, yeah. And while most of this movie does take place on the sound stages, there's also
Hmm.
quite a few that take place in city streets and on different locations and things like that. So I think it
Yeah,
does do a good enough job of showing the city as a whole. But yeah, you
yeah,
can't talk about LA without talking about Hollywood.
of course.
All right, and then the next city we have up is Boston, Massachusetts. That was an awful New England accent there. I'm gonna stop trying to do that. Um,
Just go pack the car in the yard
Yeah,
and
and,
don't
and
worry
have it
about it.
yad. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Gonna channel my inner Mark Wahlberg here.
yeah.
Boston
Wildberg.
so much is synonymous for, I would say each of these cities are sort of synonymous with like one or two things. In Boston, it's once again crime movies,
Yeah,
and then also Harvard. And so we get a lot of these like
yeah,
sort of Harvard adjacent type of stories, whether they're thrillers, intellectual dramas, things like that. So
yeah.
those are the two things that really are prominent in a lot of the movies that show up on movies that were filmed out there. But what were your picks there, Bill?
Well, Boston is usually depicted as it's always depicted as the city where like class conflict is at its height, and
Yes.
that probably has a lot to do with the fact that it's like the oldest American city or one of the oldest. It's like early America,
Hmm.
and that whole thing of like Harvard versus the townies is a common thing in Boston. It's usually Boston movies are also often about like it's like the hellmouth of trash. Like crime movies in Chicago are glamorous and it's ladies in sequins and men in spats and tuxes with Tommy guns, while as in Boston it's like low level absolute trash, like Whitey Bulger, that sort of thing. Or Gone Baby Gone is one that I think of as well in terms of like that's what people think Boston is. Neither of those are my choices because the other kind of Boston movie is movies about old money aristocratic Americans, and those are two of my choices. So one of my runner-up is a Hollywood lot movie, which is now Voyager by Irving Rapper from 1942, starring Betty Davis. This is a glorious, glorious film that I love. I saw it on the big screen, and there's just something about seeing 1940s movies on the big screen that is unlike seeing them in any other way, particularly compared to movies from other eras. But one of my favorite Betty Davis performances, a must see. Um, my number one pick, however, is Merchant Ivory's 1984 film, The Bostonians. It's a bit on the nose, I know, but based on the novel by Henry James, about Vanessa Redgrave in one of her finest performances as a very mild mannered and shy Boston Brahmin of some kind who becomes obsessed with a young woman who gives these very fiery and impassioned speeches about women's rights. And people treat this young woman like she has a gift from an otherworldly being that basically infuses her whenever she speaks. And Vanessa Redgrave gets into a sort of personal tug of war with Christopher Reeve as this very obnoxious Southern gentleman who wants to take this young woman and marry her and make a normal woman out of her, basically. It was a very controversial novel when it was published because it suggested lesbianism between the two female characters. And also was very controversial because it suggested that feminism wasn't working hard enough to change things, which a lot of women at the time, suffragists and the like, really took issue with. And a lot of that, those discussions were renewed when the film came out. It's not a movie for everyone. It's very, very slow going. James rarely makes for exciting movies on screen, but I think it's exquisite and one of Merchant Ivory's first like really rich and rewarding period pieces.
Now Voyager is also one that's been on my list for a while to watch. I always love a Betty Davis performance, and I know
Oh,
it's one of
it's
her
yeah.
more iconic ones.
Well, because it's also one of her softer ones.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's great.
And I am not familiar with the Bostonians at all. This is a completely new one to me.
Oh, yeah, she was Vanessa was nominated for Best Actress for it, and Rachel always makes fun of you for loving period pieces, so you should definitely at least give it a shot.
That's true. Rachel
Yeah,
does like to make fun of me for
yeah,
anything, really.
yeah. Well, I mean, she's cooler than both of us combined, so I guess she just has that right. What can I say?
Ugh, that's so true. It's so true.
Yeah,
And the thing is, I know she doesn't listen to the show anymore, so she's never going to hear this, which is completely
she's
fine
gonna
with me.
listen when she knows I'm on it, and trust me, I know this.
That's true. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's true.
as I'm
um,
messaging her like 15 times today, like listen to it.
Gonna start tagging her in all the posts.
That's right.
So for my runner-up pick, I am going with the journalist film Spotlight that won Best Picture.
Hmm.
Taking down the Catholic sex abuse scandals that was happening not just in Boston but all over the world, but specifically in Boston, where
Yeah.
the local investigative journalist uncovered it all and the connections. Great film. They show a great deal of the city on the ground, which is really cool too.
I think a lot of it was shot here, though. In
I,
Toronto, I
I
mean.
I
Sorry.
believe a lot of it was
Yeah.
the interior stuff, but the exterior
Right.
was all there. Yeah.
Nice.
But my actual pick, you sort of mentioned this filmmaker, a different movie of his, but I am going with his sophomore film, and that is Ben Affleck's The Town.
Um,
Um, I love baseball. I don't usually love sports movies, but this movie has a huge sequence that takes place at Fenway Park, a baseball park that I have visited, and frankly, I find it a little overrated.
well,
I know
that's
you.
probably more about history than anything else, but yeah.
It is,
Yeah.
yes. It's one of those things where yes, the building is 130 years old and it
Right.
looks it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I
But
just got a
this,
splinter from the benches. Thank you for your 130-year-old building. Yeah.
yes, yeah, yeah. Um, you talked about the sort of like the towny versus Harvard side of Boston, and this is literally the towny side of things where we see a lot of these neighborhoods that Ben Affleck sort of grew up adjacent to, so he is very familiar with them, does a great job. And it's sort of this very unique situation about how apparently true the most bank robberies in America happen in a very small city square section of Boston,
Yeah.
which is a crazy occurrence. But I think they do a great job, and frankly, also Jeremy Renner at his absolute best because I don't really care for him otherwise.
Yeah, his second Oscar nomination as well. I hope that guy's okay. I hope that like he's well enough to act again someday because he's really been through it since that accident that he had.
He has, yes,
Yeah.
he has. That's true.
Hmm.
All right. Well, let us move over to San Francisco. It was a city that I visited for the first time last year. That's where I went for my
Oh,
birthday last year. Was a
yes. Oh,
trip down
yes,
to
I
San
remember
Francisco.
this. Yeah,
Yeah, I went there to see some baseball games, continuing
that's
on the
right.
trend of the town. Went to San Francisco and Oakland.
That's great.
Uh, in San Francisco, beautiful, beautiful city, characterized by having the first and largest Chinatown in the United States. So that is a very prominent aspect of the city. The fact that it is on a giant hill, so everything is either uphill or downhill from where you need to be.
That's right.
Alcatraz, the rolling fog, all this great stuff. It's a
Yeah.
very mysterious and beautiful city. Is that one you've been to?
I have not. I have actually never been to the west side of the continent, so I've never been to where you are, and I've never been to the western United States.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it is high on my list.
It was very cold, even though it was July.
Yeah, because Northern California is a different. It's a different climate than the southern part.
Yes, I had to
Yeah,
wear a jacket at all times,
yeah.
but it was still a great trip. So, Bill, what were your picks for the city?
For some reason, the film that I think of first when I think of San Francisco is Milton Katselas' "Butterflies Are Free" from 1972. This is a delightful film. It's also a rom com in a way, starring Goldie Hawn and Edward Albert, and Eileen Heckart won an Oscar for it. It's mostly takes place indoors, but the opening scene is her arriving at her new apartment. So you go through the streets of San Francisco. So if you haven't seen it, it's a charmer. But my number one is probably one of yours, and it's everyone's, which is the film probably everyone thinks of when they think of San Francisco, which is Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo from 1958, a film whose locations you probably toured on your trip last year.
Yes,
Hitchcock
I
said
did.
he loved San Francisco because Northern California reminded him of England, so he loved filming there. And even though a lot of it is faked, there are a lot of shots in the city, and it shows the city off to beautiful, beautiful advantage. I don't really need to tell people much about this film. It was recently voted the greatest film of all time, so people have heard of it in the second last Sight and Sound poll.
Hmm.
So yeah. Sorry, I cut you off. You were going to say something about your trip.
No, I was just going to agree with you that yes, I did tour
Yeah,
several of the locations where they went.
yeah,
Obviously, I didn't go inside them, but like, oh, and this is this building. Oh, this is this building, sort of
yeah.
thing.
Which have been used in a million other films, but like they're Vertigo as far as we're concerned.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I considered putting Vertigo on my list, and I decided to go with two different options. But kind of like Singing in the Rain, I think Vertigo is probably the film from San Francisco.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Honorable mention though to A View to a Kill. But anyway, go on.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. With that great sequence on the Golden Gate Bridge where they're running up
Yes.
the
And
side
the
of it.
fire
Yeah,
truck sequence,
yeah.
there's always a shot in a San Francisco movie where we have to go on those vertical roads, even though that's not the whole city. But for some reason, it's so cinematic that people think that that's all of San Francisco is those very, very steep roads.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So for my runner-up film, I went with The Maltese Falcon.
Oh,
Now,
okay.
a lot of this is shot indoors, and I imagine it was shot in LA on sound stages. But I picked it for mostly sentimental value. When I was in San Francisco, I managed to find a copy of Dashiell Hammett's book, The Maltese Falcon, where it was annotated with photos from the era that Hammett wrote the book of, like, oh, and this is what bar that he's going to meet up with an informant, in a photo of the actual street and bar from that time, like using city archives. And like, oh, and this is the hotel that they're at, this is the streets that they're walking down, all this sort of stuff, which I found was very fascinating. So for a sentimental reason, I'm including the Maltese Falcon here.
Amazing.
But my actual pick is going to be the Peter Yates film Bullitt, starring Steve McQueen, about a San Francisco cop who goes on probably, I don't know, top one, top two car chase scenes in all of cinema history. Now I've seen a map of how the car chase plays out, and kind of much like how you're talking with LA, sometimes you magically jump from one end of the city to the other. They
Right.
do that. But nonetheless, it highlights all of the most iconic streets in San Francisco with this incredible car just sort of bouncing over these giant hills in the city.
Amazing. You've got me twice, Dakota. I still have not seen this movie.
Wow.
I know, and I
Okay.
started it at one point many years ago, and something distracted me, and I never got back to it. I've always meant to watch it. It's an Oscar winner, I believe, for best film editing. I'm not huge on Steve McQueen. He's not one of my favorite old movie actors. He's a real straight guy's paradise. There's something very uncomplicated about him that doesn't appeal to us. But I do want to see this film.
Yeah, it's funny that the two films you haven't seen yet both feature some pretty big car chase sequences, which I find funny.
Well, I think a picture is forming, isn't it? Yeah.
Don't want to say anything. All right. Well, we sort of previewed it a little bit at the top when we were talking about cities with personalities. Up next, we've got
Mhm.
Washington D.C., which obviously is the capital of the United States. So obviously, politics, all this sort of stuff is going to play into movies that are set there. Basically, regardless if a movie is set there, you're gonna get a shot of either the White House or Washington Monument, or
Mhm.
whatever iconic Washington D.C. thing the first conjures in your head. A movie is going to feature it. So, what were your picks for DC?
My runner-up. Speaking of homosexuals, my runner-up is Otto Preminger's *Advise and Consent* from 1962. This is not one of his easier films to find, but then it's probably easier to find now. But many years ago, they screened it at Jackman Hall, and I went and saw it, and I was riveted from beginning to end. And it's about I won't get into it, but it's a Secretary of State is possibly going to be a senator is going to be possibly instated as Secretary of State. There's a board formed to decide this, and there are many players involved in what happens, including blackmail, all these things. It's got an incredible cast, including none other than Betty White in like one of her few feature film roles in 1962 as a female senator in one shot. It's a must see. So if you haven't seen it, watch it. But my number one pick, and this is going to be sacrilegious to a lot of people, is Born Yesterday, not the Oscar winning 1950 version by George Cukor. I've always been partial to the 1993 remake by Louis Mondoki, starring Melanie Griffith, mother of one of our other favorite Dakotas in this world, and Don Johnson, who is, of course, her father. very few real life couples have hot chemistry on screen, and Melanie and Dawn are among the few that do. And this movie is a delight. It opens up a lot of the original material to give her more of an opportunity to really enjoy all the knowledge that she learns. And if anyone doesn't know, it's about this sort of bullish, self made businessman who comes to Washington, D.C. to sort of basically buy off senators so that he can use a huge parcel of land that's currently occupied by the army to turn it into a shopping complex and, make a lot of money. But his girlfriend is this former showgirl who embarrasses him when he takes her to Washington parties. So he hires a brainy journalist to smarten her up. It's kind of a Pygmalion story. And it's thoroughly delightful. One of Melanie Griffith's most charming performances. There is a sequence where she teaches everyone at dinner the amendments of the Constitution using the 12 Days of Christmas that I still love and know off by heart for some reason. I guess because I've seen the movie a million times. But I think this movie is charm central. And it's, takes place in Washington. She goes through to the library and she goes to the monuments and she does all of that. It's great.
All I heard from that was you say Pygmalion. I don't know why that sticks out in my head right now, Bill.
Because I'm about to head over to perform in it, but yeah.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Great picks once again. 0 for 2 on them. You're getting me real good here today, Bill.
Well, I mean, Born Yesterday might not be your thing. My friends make fun of me for how much I love this movie, but I just love this movie, and you're all going to have to get over it. But Advise and Consent is something you definitely have to see.
That one sounds really interesting. One that I was not familiar with, and
I love
Preminger is great.
So yeah.
So both of my films, I went strongly into the political landscape here.
Mm-hmm.
My runner up is In the Loop. I absolutely love this film about basically how the Iraq War accidentally got started. It's from the creator of Veep, or for our more British listeners, The Thick of It, who you obviously know who Armando Iannucci is. Hilarious film. James Gandolfini at one of his best roles in such a comedic role as this general. I love that film. And then my actual pick, I'm sure you are not going to be surprised at all with my choice here. Probably the most obvious one on the entire list, and that is All the President's Men. I love good journalism movies. I already mentioned Spotlight. Here's the other one, All the President's Men. I think they're the number one and number two in terms of great journalist films. But this Alan J. Pakula classic about the discovering of what happened during Watergate from the Washington Post reporters, Woodward and Bernstein, is just such an exciting film. I love watching them do the work to try to figure out the details of this case. And the fact that we see the break-in at the very beginning. It's such this innocuous thing that happens, and then the meaning behind it and what ends up happening down the line. It's just such a powerful film. I love this movie so much.
I love it too. It is so good. I had loved it for many years, and then I rewatched it for the first time in ages. I want to say a couple years ago, and it impressed me even more. It's a movie that never tries hard at all to be exciting, and yet it's so gripping. Yeah, and it's also people talk about Gordon Willis being the genius of 70s cinema and his daring use of low light and all that stuff. They never use this as an example, though. They're more likely to talk about The Godfather, but I think this, or like The Parallax View or something. But I think this movie is also a really great example of his incredibly sturdy, even cinematography that never calls attention to itself, but it is a work of art. And then this crazy Oscar win for Best Art Direction, mainly because of the way that they recreated the Washington Post newsroom down to the last typewriter.
Yeah.
You know?
I love the look and feel of this movie, and the cinematography is probably one of the best shot films in my books.
Oh, sure.
It is very subtle, but the more you watch it, the more impressive it feels. Like there's some great split diopter shots, the way that they stage the focus on having like things happening in the background and foreground. They do such a great job.
It's the movie you think of when people talk about the 70s being amazing. It's one of those few movies that you go to, as opposed to the like disco stuff that makes you think the 70s were like a groovy nightmare.
Yeah.
All the President's Men is sort of the better half of that. And then, Spielberg tries to recreate its glory when he makes The Post, and that movie's weaknesses only serve to make All the President's Men seem that much better. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I am someone that is not a fan of The Post. I know it does have its fan base, but I am not a part of it.
Does it have a fan base?
It shockingly does.
Oh, okay.
I
Yeah.
have some friends that are huge advocates for it, and every time I'm just like, but why? It's not very good.
Well, I guess there's a lid for every pot.
I guess so.
Yeah.
Uh, all right, let's move on to Las Vegas, city of sin. What
Mhm.
happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. All that fun stuff. We know the glitz, the glamour, the casinos, the gambling, the mafia, all that sort of fun stuff. What were your choices?
Well, my runner-up is again a bit on the nose. Viva Las Vegas by George Sidney, starring Elvis Presley. What is this movie about? Who knows? Who cares? It's a delight from start to finish. Something about a race car, and then Anne Margaret wearing bodysuits under her costumes, under her bodysuits under her bodysuits. So she has like a really weird thing that happens in her thighs because of it. But and I'm not going to go into it because it'll sound gross. Um, the point is that this is a movie that Rachel loves, so it's another opportunity to say hi to her. But my number one pick is, speaking of James Bond, Guy Hamilton's Diamonds Are Forever from 1971. Not everyone's favorite Bond movie, but it's one that I particularly love. I don't know if I've talked about this on the show. I'm a massive, massive James Bond fanatic. I would rather watch a bad Bond movie than just about anything else. So there's not really such thing as a bad Bond movie, even when they're bad. But I do like this one. It's Sean Connery's return to the franchise after taking a bit of a break. Even though he was sick of playing him and he wanted to expand on other things, but he couldn't get work making other movies. And so he was enticed through a very high salary to come back. Didn't hit the gym, didn't shave his shoulders, he didn't care. And it's right there on the screen, and it only makes him that much more attractive. We have the first major Bond girl who's American, played by Jill St. John. And also Natalie Wood's sister is in it as a character delightfully named Plenty O'Toole. And it's a story about diamonds in the international market and smuggling. But ultimately, it's a movie that turns Howard Hughes into a villain played by Sausage King Jimmy Dean. And the scenes set in Vegas are absolutely fantastic. And it's also like a really gorgeous view of a much smaller, simpler Vegas than we have today, even though at the time it wouldn't have been seen that way. But even though I've never been there, but in terms of what I know from how it's been represented, it's a much simpler place than what it becomes later on.
My favorite part of Diamonds Are Forever are the two women bodyguards that he
Yes,
has as his security at his house.
named Bambi and Thumper, and
Yeah.
they basically like aerobicize him into a stupor. We also have a very, I know everyone's really offended by it, but I'm sort of an old school gay who I guess went through enough in life to not care. But I love the male couple who set bombs off and then run away holding hands, skipping. I think they're delightful. One of them played by Crispin Glover's dad.
Oh, yeah. I
Yeah.
know who you're talking about. Yeah, that, it's a very hilarious characterization that they do, where every once in a while, like, it's a very fairly serious action film, and then
Yeah,
you cut to these
I
two
know.
henchmen. Yeah.
Absolute character, like caricature is cartoonish, but like so is everybody. So because it's James Bond, so
Yep.
I don't, my hackles don't go up over that sort of thing.
All right. And yeah, Viva Las Vegas, you're right. I watched the film. I still don't really know what the plot is. It was something about him needing an engine for a race car. I don't know, but it was an excuse for Anne Margaret and Elvis to have insane chemistry and for her to dance awkwardly. I don't.
I know, but
Great.
she
Like,
has, when you have tights on tights and it gives you double bum. She has
yeah.
that, but it's in her thigh. It's the weirdest thing.
Yeah.
It looks like her vagina is on the side of her body. Is what it looks like. Okay, I didn't want to say it, but here we are. That is a movie that also needs to be seen on the big screen because the first time I watched it, I thought it was one of the weakest Elvis features, and then my friend took me to see it at the Fox, and I had the night of my life. I couldn't get enough of this movie.
Nice.
Yeah.
And also features for me, I feel like the only time I've ever seen Elvis with his hair not done up, because he goes swimming in it and you see
Oh,
him like
right.
with
Yeah.
his hair slicked back and you're like, "Oh, that's what your head looks like?" Okay.
Yes. But it's when he's starting to really enjoy the donut buffet. So he's not in his
Mm,
finest shape. You got to watch
mm.
Fine Acapulco to see him at his fittest and hottest.
All right. So for my picks, you can't get away from the casinos. My runner up here, you can go with either one. Both Ocean's 11 movies, I think,
Hmm.
do a great job of showing at the time what Las Vegas is like. Technically, I'm going with the Steven Soderbergh one, but the original Rat Pack film also does a great job of showing you the Strip
Yeah.
and how
And
much
both
fun
are
they were having
iconic.
there. Yeah, they
Yeah.
really are. But my actual pick is, this is probably my most straight guy pick out of all of them. But I'm sure you've seen it and probably love it, and that's The Hangover.
The Hangover's
Um,
a classic.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it is one of those ones where like you want to like kick it down or something like that, but then you see a clip from it again and you realize just how hilarious it was. It's from an era when R-rated comedies were at their absolute peak. And basically, it all went downhill after this because nothing was able to replicate it,
Including very bad
especially
sequels.
the
Yeah.
Hangover sequels. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the first time I remember seeing this in theaters, and just the trio of Bradley Cooper, Ed Helms, and Zach Galifianakis just absolutely cracking me up to the point where, like, when you get the photo montage at the very end of the film in the credits showing you what actually happened the night they lost the groom,
Right.
is one of the best sequences in the whole film too, and it's like basically an afterthought credits thing.
It's a classic movie. It is so good, and it's partly. I think the problem is a writer friend of mine, he's a someone I've contacted online. He says that every genre begins with one great movie, and then like a million bad ones follow. And like The Notebook is like the first great dramatic romance, and then everything else after it is just garbage. And this is also the case with this. And partly it's because people don't really realize what it is that's so good about the first one. They focus on the other things. So, like, yes, The Hangover does on its surface have these magnificent comedic set pieces and the great chemistry between the actors and the drop dead humor, all that stuff. But secretly, it's actually critical of toxic masculinity, even though it seems like it's celebrating it. There's that scene where he's in the doctor's office and you see the old man who's getting checked up, and you just see his very, very elderly body that's like basically ready to die. And it's this movie basically telling us that these guys are terrified of where things are heading, and that this is them desperately trying to, enjoy life before they end up like this. That movie has elements of that its imitators, and including its sequels, did not have. And so there's it's so fun. I mean, it's so fun, but there's stuff to hang on to in that film as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the Heather Graham character is the MVP for me too.
Oh, I mean, everybody, absolutely everybody. It's so great, and deservedly made Bradley Cooper a star. He's magnificent in it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so let us go to our last American city on the list, and that is Philadelphia. I will say this was the hardest city for me to choose from. There was only like probably about 5 films that I'd even seen that I felt qualified enough to be seen
Right.
there.
Yeah.
I at this point I was sort of scraping the barrel of what's the last American city. I don't know if you had any thoughts of different cities that I should have considered, but this sort of felt like going past 7. This was probably the next one up, and it's a steep drop off.
Yeah, I mean, it's less represented compared to other cities, and when things are shot there, it's rarely like there isn't a famous cinematic personality to the city the way there is with the other ones.
Yeah, and it
Yeah.
sort of also starts and ends with Rocky. It's a movie
Right.
that did not make my list, but like
Right.
that's the one that everyone goes to.
Yeah. Even though I totally forgot that was even shot there because I haven't seen that movie since I was like 18 years old. But I
Well,
do
what
want to
are your
rewatch it.
picks there, Bill?
Well, my runner-up is a recent, obvious one. It's The Brutalist by Brady Corbet from last year, along with Honora was my favorite movie of last year, and represents what a lot of people think of that city being, and also like a sort of class-conscious divide between steel barons and the people who are exploited by them. I don't need to explain what The Brutalist is about to anyone, if especially if they're listeners to your show, because they would have listened to all your Oscar episodes about it. But I think it's really great. And then for number one, I have Brian De Palma's Blowout from 1981. I love early De Palma, or do we want to say mid-career De Palma? I don't know how people consider that. I love Dress to Kill the most. I enjoy Body Double. I enjoy Obsession. But I also really like Blowout, which is his tribute to Michelangelo Antonioni's Blow Up, about John Travolta as a sound recordist who one night is out grabbing wild sounds from I don't know, a reservoir or something, owls and water babbling and air, and witnesses a car crash that ends up, and he rescues the girl who was in the car. The man who was driving dies, and then he ends up in the middle of this political conspiracy. Philadelphia is, of course, the city of brotherly love, the city with the Liberty Bell. It's associated with American politics, so it's probably not by accident that De Palma chose to set his story there. And I just think it's a really, really great film.
I have seen Blow Up. I have not seen Blowout. It's
Oh,
long been on my list.
yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I considered another De Palma film. I considered Dress to Kill as well because I really like that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, great choices here. The Brutalist, you're right. It's funny. Whenever I think of The Brutalist, and for some reason I always forget it's actually not set in New York. I know they arrive in New York, and just because the poster has the Statue of Liberty in it, I always forget that it's not actually
That's
set
right.
there for most of the time.
Yeah, generally, if a movie is about steel,
Yeah.
it's Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you were mentioning The Brutalist, you mentioned Enora, and I considered that for Vegas, and that was the one movie I was considering that wasn't primarily set in
Oh,
the
okay.
actual city.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. All right, but in terms of my picks, I went with my runner-up being Philadelphia's possibly most famous filmmaker, and that's M. Night Shyamalan's The Sixth Sense.
All right, that's a Philly movie too.
Basically, all of his movies are Philly-based
Yeah,
too.
I
Yeah,
forget
he
that.
is. That's something he takes very seriously about trying to put Philadelphia on film,
I had a friend
except
who
for when
used to
he's
do
filming in
an
Toronto.
imitation of Toni Collette at the end of that film. You know, the "Do I make you proud?" She used to do it, and it used to make me fall on the floor crying, laughing. It was so good, like the nails to the nose and everything.
Oh boy,
Yeah.
I can only imagine.
Also a great movie that inspired like a million imitators that were never as good.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. This sort of supernatural thriller that forgets that it's, a family drama and this story about this one man, and they all focus on the supernatural element.
And people have been chasing that shock ending for years, and no one has been able to replicate it, especially M. Night Shyamalan,
Yeah.
who doesn't really quite know what he did there. But that ending, I mean, I don't remember if you're old enough. I saw that movie like the weekend that it opened, and I didn't even want to see it that badly. My cousins wanted to, so I went
Oh
with them,
wow.
and I saw it in a packed house. It was like the second day that it was playing, and it was a full theater. And when that happened, the girl beside me was screaming. Like people were screaming in the theater. It was like the theater was shaking the way I usually associate when you see a comedy that's really hitting big with people, and like the raucous laughter. People were screaming when that happened. It still excites me to think about that night.
Oh my god, that
Yeah.
sounds incredible.
Yeah.
There's like a handful of movies that like I wish I could have seen, opening weekend, and
Yeah.
that would be one of those things where pre-internet, before
Yeah.
everything is disseminated before and everyone knows everything that happens, that was truly a genuinely shock twist. Like I
Yeah.
didn't see it then, but I remember hearing about it, and that's all people talk about
And
now.
I don't remember knowing that there was a twist ending. So if people knew that, I didn't get that news. So as far as I'm concerned, people weren't even looking for it. And then once it hit big, because I think the studio was just prepping for a regular thriller release. I don't think they were expecting like the movie of the year. And
Hmm.
so once it hit big, then it became a thing. You know, look for the shot. There's a surprise ending, and so then you're
Yeah.
looking for it. It's not quite as exciting. Anyway, that's not your top pick. I'm sorry, I've overextended us.
No, 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 no. I appreciate hearing that. That
Yeah.
sounds like one of the like core movie memories someone could end up having.
Well,
That's
and it's so, I
incredible.
mean, not a lot of us get to be there when it happened, you know, like, unless
Yeah.
you're like a professional film critic, maybe you get to be there, but like it's rare. And so when I have those experiences of having been there, before something became something. It's pretty exciting. I mean, I remember seeing Titanic on opening day and thinking it was just an enjoyable historical drama, and the theater was mildly attended, and it wasn't that big a deal.
Hmm.
And we went on opening day, and then next thing you know, it's this phenomenon, and I ended up seeing it 3 more times without even trying. I didn't even want to.
Yeah, that was definitely a movie that had legs.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, but my actual pick, I mentioned off the top, I don't like Rocky. I, in fact, hate Rocky. I think it's a terrible movie, and I know
Hmm.
that does not endear me to the film bro community because that is the poster child of Mount Rushmore of film bro movies, basically.
Sure.
But Creed, I love Creed.
Yeah.
I think Creed does everything Rocky thinks it's doing on a far better scale. And the fact that they sort of show us on the ground streets, showing the neighborhood that this character grew up in, both on the rich side of things and in the sort of like the lower income side of things, I think it does a fantastic job of showing us everything that Rocky wishes it was.
Mm.
And frankly, Sylvester Stallone at his best too.
Yeah, he's marvelous in it. I mean, I would argue that you just have to admit that one cannot exist without the other.
Yes, that
Uh,
is true.
and also, Rocky's probably a movie that we should have been there when it happened. I think
Yes.
because, I mean, I grew up in the era when Stallone was putting out those sequels, which have very little to do with the charm of the original. And Creed is the first movie that brings us back to what people loved about the first one. It's the first one that is as critically acclaimed as it is popular. It's kind of a shame that he's cut out of it by that point. Like he's in the movie, but in terms of, I think he'd been cut out of the profits of the franchise from the beginning, and then he didn't write this one, which maybe was a good thing. I don't know. And then Creed was also followed by what I thought was a really boring sequel, and then I enjoyed the third one well enough, but the first one is really, really good.
Yeah, I didn't care for the second one, and because I didn't care for it, I haven't gone on to the third one
It's
yet.
better. It's better than part two.
Okay.
Yeah, part
Okay,
two.
good to
I
know.
think I fell asleep if I recall.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let us move on to our next city, and this is we're going to do two Canadian ones, as I said, and the first one is Toronto. And I thought about doing more Canadian cities, but after Toronto, the options decline very, very
Yeah.
quickly. And
My
after
favorite
Montreal, even more.
Saskatoon movie is.
Yeah, if I was to just do 10 Canadian cities, oh boy, it would basically just be like Toronto and the suburbs of Toronto.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, let's talk about Toronto first. Bill, what were your choices for the capital of Ontario?
Well, as you said, Toronto is used to replicate many other cities because they like to film here. It's usually cheaper. But I wanted to stick with movies that were shot here and set here as well. Which, as I mentioned, that Toronto film, Dead Ringer, the documentary, it talks about this in it as well in terms of how Toronto is represented when it plays other places. But anyway, my number two runner up is Winter Kept Us Warm by David Sector from 1965. I did an episode of BGM on this film. It was shot by U of T students who were studying, I think they were STEM students, if I recall correctly, because there's no film program at U of T in the mid 60s. And it's really good, and apparently is going to get a restoration this year or has been restored, which is great because the YouTube version really sucks. And I know that this movie is worth cherishing. The guys who made it were fellow students with David Cronenberg, who was like, "Oh, my friends made a movie. I can do that too." And the rest is history. And then speaking of David Cronenberg, my number one pick is Dead Ringers by David Cronenberg, my favorite Cronenberg film from 1988, set in Toronto. I remember he sticks his nose up in the air when he says that Geneviève Bujold lives in her Rosedale apartment. And we know what that means. I think it's a thrilling thriller. It is a movie that still upsets people. My dad used to scream at me to turn it off when we'd watch it because men cannot handle anything in the realm of what we used to call gynecology. Admittedly, he
Mhm.
makes those mutant instruments that are. I mean, I think anybody would be freaked out by them. But just the fact that it is set in. I mean, Cronenberg said that he asked a lot of A-list actors to be in it who said, "I'll do it if you could change their job." They didn't want to play again, at the time, as we called them, gynecologists. which is fascinating and a podcast conversation all entirely on itself. But I think it's one of the finest psychosexual thrillers, and Jeremy Irons in a double role as the twins, doing a bang-up job in both of them. Geneviève Bujold is fantastic. Kiefer Sutherland's mother, I believe, is in it. Shirley Douglas. Isn't she? I know I'm blanking. But anyway, it's a mess.
It's been a while since I've seen it, yeah.
Yeah. And also, I love the way Cronenberg... First of all, I love that he makes his movies in Toronto. You know, this guy went mainstream a long time ago, and he refused to let go of his connection to being a Canadian filmmaker. He insists on making his movies here. He insists often on setting them here, unless, of course, unless that doesn't make sense, like M. Butterfly. And always also insists on casting Canadian actors in major roles, which is actually rare. I know that our unions require Canadians to have roles in things that are shot here, but it's usually people being given throwaway stuff, or it's someone who's like technically Canadian, like Anna Paquin, even though they're not actually Canadian, and you're not supporting the Canadian industry by casting someone like that in a major role. So, you know, I love that about it. And I love in particular the way he makes Toronto look in this film as this brooding, haunted, gorgeous city.
Yeah, the Den Ringer is an interesting one for me, where I've only watched it once and I didn't connect with it as much as I have Cronenberg's other films.
Oh, okay.
But it's one of those films where I watch it, I go, I don't know if it worked for me, but I definitely know I need to rewatch at some point to sort of reevaluate my thoughts on it.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, Videodrome probably is even better for seeing Toronto in an era, like preserved in the time capsule. And I do like that film, but I like Dead Ringers more.
Nice. I strongly considered Crash as well, just because of all the shots of the Don Valley Parkway.
Yeah. That movie hasn't aged well for me, though. Like, if you've listened to our Riviera Rats episode about 1996, I rewatched it for that, and I don't like it as much as I used to.
That's fair. It's still my favorite Cronenberg,
I
I
remember you
think.
saying that,
But I like your choices, and I do remember listening to your episode on Winter Kept Us Warm. And it's one that I have wanted to check out ever since you did it on BGM. And it's so funny because, you know, the title of your podcast suggests that they are not good movies, but every once in a while you'll watch the film and the podcast will be like, well, it actually isn't that bad of a movie. It's worth checking out.
Yeah, it means that I didn't screen it before choosing it for the film. It was someone's recommendation, and I decided to trust them. And like, it's fine. You know, we've reviewed a lot of movies. I don't have to hate them. I'm sure I can still be entertaining even while liking a film. But it's good that you waited to watch it, because now that it's being restored, you're going to see it in the best possible way. So.
Yeah, that's very exciting. And that's something, you know, Matthew Simpson and I often talk about, is how we wish that Canadian films got more restorations and, you know, boutique film releases, things like that, where for the most part are just completely ignored.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a matter of raising the money for them. And it can't be that hard a project. There's not that many when you go that far back.
Yeah, it basically, like, if a movie is older than 10 years... in Canadian film, it's basically impossible to find.
Yeah.
But my choices, my runner-up film is Last Night, the Don McKellar film about the end of the world and two people in Toronto who meet and have a connection. I love this film, and while I didn't pick a David Cronenberg film for Toronto, which very much shame on me because he is one of my favorite directors, he has probably one of the best supporting performances you could hope for of casting someone like David Cronenberg as this Hydro, I believe, CEO, calling all of his customers one by one, thanking them for their continued service as the world is ending, which is just amazing.
Yeah, it's a good movie. It's probably Don McKellar's only really good movie, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it's his only great movie. I've liked a few of his other ones, but it's definitely his best film, and one that I would love to see, speaking of proper releases, to get a restoration and release.
Yeah, absolutely.
But my number one Toronto film is the Denis Villeneuve film Enemy. Jake Gyllenhaal playing possibly two different people, a famous actor and a university professor, a U of T professor. No, I think it's actually a York professor. I can't remember.
I've actually never seen it, so I can't help you here. Yeah, I know. You know, because you and Rachel go on and on and on about Denis Villeneuve, and it sort of fills me up for the month, and then I can't hear his name again. So, yeah.
But basically, we've got this university professor who believes he sees his doppelganger when he's watching a movie, and he goes out to try to meet him and figure out what's going on if they actually are doppelgangers and things like that.
Hmm.
But there is a real reason why you should watch this, and that's because this is an Isabel Watch movie.
Is it?
Yes.
She's in it?
I Yes, I might have to clip some audio from Riviera Watch to do Isabel Watch, Isabel Watch, Isabel Watch. Yes,
No,
she
I feel
plays
like
the
I would
mother.
know it if she was in it.
She plays the mother of one of Jake Gyllenhaal characters.
You have to be wrong about this. There's just no
I
way.
am not, and it is an incredible
No,
performance.
you're
I
talking about
love it.
Isabella Rossellini.
Yeah, is that not?
Oh
Is
wow.
that no Isabella
Oh,
Watches?
Dakota. Wow, we've come to this moment. No. See? And I told Greg on one episode we should say her last name because people don't know who we're talking about. No, it's Isabelle Huppert that we're talking about.
Oh right,
Yeah.
yes, your love of Isabel
Yeah.
Huppert. My
But you
bad.
know what? We
It's
do
the other
talk
Isabel
about
Watch.
Isabella Rossellini a lot because we talk about my mother, Ingrid Bergman, because
Yes.
we adored the fact that her entire Oscar campaign was every time someone put a microphone in her face, they'd be like, "How are you doing today?" Well, you know, my mother, Ingrid Bergman, also had 2 Oscars, and yeah.
Yeah, this my apologies to both you
No,
and
you know
Greg
what? I
for,
was just like,
messing
how could
up
there be an
Isabel
Isabel
Watch.
movie that I did not know she was in? This is
Yeah.
impossible. Yeah. Anyway, go on. But
But
I did not know that Rossellini was in it, so now I have even more reason to bump it up the list.
there we go.
Yeah,
Good. Yeah, you definitely should. We get a lot of really cool shots of the city, including giant spiders that crawl over the city skyline
right.
in a very unnerving way. And despite the fact that I've seen this movie, I think 2 or 3 times, I still refuse to watch the final shot of this film because of my terrible arachnophobia.
Oh wow.
So yeah, so anyone that does have arachnophobia, there is a lot of spiders in this movie. So be warned.
What's it like for you? Like, do you just get grossed out by seeing millions of them in a movie, or is there one in your house and you have to kill it?
I feel like if I talk about it, it's gonna trigger
Oh, I'm
something.
sorry. Okay, all right.
It's all
I'm
right.
interested
No,
because it's not something. It's not one of mine. You know.
it's like the hair, the
Oh, okay.
eyes, the movement, all that sort of stuff just absolutely unnerves me.
Huh.
The bigger, the worse.
All right.
Yeah. But yeah, some fantastic shots of the city done in a really unique way because, you know, you talked about Cronenberg and the way he shoots the city so well. I feel like that's sort of the definitive look of Toronto, especially over the years. I think Villeneuve did something really different and unique
Mm-hmm.
that captured modern Toronto in a way that we haven't seen look as sleek and as cool as it can while still remaining Toronto, not pretending to be New York or Chicago or anywhere
For
else.
sure. And now a moment of
Okay.
silence for all your friends who are upset that neither of us chose Scott Pilgrim. Let's just
I considered it.
give
I
them
considered it.
space to cry
Yeah.
and yeah.
I think it was on one of my first lists.
Mm-hmm.
So I subconsciously was like, I've picked this before. But yes, Scott Pilgrim, definitely. Great. All right, we're on to our last one, and that is Montreal. And this might have probably our most obscure picks, mostly because almost all the films set in Montreal are French Canadian films. So unless you watch a lot of French Canadian films, you probably haven't seen the movies we're about to talk about. Bill, what were your
I
choices?
haven't actually kept up with their industry as well as I used to. I used to watch a lot more of their films, and I have to get back into it because,
It's hard. We don't get a lot of them out.
well, or we do, like, they're not, it's not that they're hard to find, they're just not placed under our nose, you know, because they do well enough in their own part of Canada. And so, like, I can always find them somewhere, but they rarely
Mhm.
play in our theaters, and, you know, the ads rarely come across my desk, basically.
Yeah.
I find out about a lot of them when they get nominated for what used to be Genie Awards and now Canadian Screen Awards. That's how I learn about many of
Yeah.
them existing, or of course at TIFF. But people often think of French Canadians as making the best Canadian movies. I think that was for sure true back in the day. I don't know that it has to be true now. Um, but um, but anyway, I think my picks are rather mainstream. My number two runner up is Crazy from 2005 by the late great Jean Marc Vallée. This is a movie that was highly, highly acclaimed when it came out, and then had a very botched American release because no one wanted to pay to clear the music in it. But I think it's a wonderful film, and normally would have been my number one choice. I love this film so much. But my number one is Denis Arcand's Jésus de Montréal, Jesus of Montreal from 1989, which will be a subject on a future Riviera Rats episode because it took, I believe, third place at Cannes in 1989. But is an incredible film. I watched it many, many years ago, and it meant nothing to me as a youngster. And then I rewatched it a couple years ago. I rented the DVD, I believe. I don't remember what it was. And speaking of needing restorations, this movie deserves a 4K restoration. It is in terrible shape. If you watch it on YouTube, it looks exactly like what's available on DVD. And that is a crime because it is a gorgeously shot film that a lot of it takes place at night and you can't really see what's going on. It's about a theater troupe putting on a passion play, and the lead actor, played by Lothar Bluteau, who some of you might know from his many guest appearances on SVU, he is in many ways inspired by the experience of doing this play to enact the principles of Jesus Christ in his own way, in his modern capitalist world, and reveal the hypocrisies of the people, including the Catholic Church, who was even putting on this play. It's incredibly, incredibly good. I was so blown away watching it again this many years later, and we just need to talk about this film more as a canon Canadian classic.
Yeah, that's one of our Canada's a huge Canadian blind spot for me. I have not seen any of his films, which is makes me feel personally very ashamed because I know of his stature within the Canadian
Yeah, well, you don't need to
industry.
be ashamed. Partly that's also the time of your life, and like it's your generation as well. Like if you were as old as me or older, you would have known him a lot better because every time he made a movie, like it got a major release. The Barbarian Invasions wins big at Cannes, so it gets a big release, and then of course it goes on to win an Oscar. It's still Canada's only Oscar, so it's
Hmm.
partly it's just that a lot of it's timing because a lot of his stuff just didn't stay that relevant after, and he hasn't made a movie. I believe he's still working, and he hasn't made a movie in a long time that really pierced the veil the way he did in his heyday. So,
Yeah, you're right.
mm-hmm.
And Crazy was originally my first choice, my winner,
Mm-hmm.
but I decided against it. I love that film,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the one that because it was a period piece, I wanted something that was shot in and around the time that is set. So that's the only reason why I decided to not include it. But you're absolutely right for picking up as your runner up because it is an incredible film and
Okay, but to be
one of the
fair,
best films I've
most of
ever seen.
Montreal still looks like it did in 1978 or whenever it is that movie takes place. So you don't have to, you don't even have to make that concession for that film.
You're not
Yeah.
wrong. My runner up film, both my Montreal films are quite recent. I don't have the same history with watching Quebecois cinema, older films, so I don't have as much to pull from here. But my runner up is a movie called Solo from I believe last year, or the year before, about a drag queen. I believe the director is his name is Frederic Pellerin or something like that. I can't remember. I should have looked this up. But a really delightful film about the drag scene in Montreal that I quite liked.
Oh, okay, I don't know it. I'll look it up.
Yeah, really good. And my number one film is also a movie from I think 2 years ago, and that is one called Red Rooms, directed by Pascal Plante.
Oh.
This really dark and disturbing thriller about a woman who we see her watching the trial of basically someone that is like Paul Bernardo.
Mm-hmm.
For Canadians, you will know exactly what I mean by that. Americans, I would say Google it, but I don't want to ruin your day, so please don't Google who Paul Bernardo is.
Again, if they're old
Trust
enough,
me,
they know because that guy
that's true.
made headlines all around the world at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But basically, we've got this young woman who's watching the court case unfold, and then we see that she is going into red rooms on the dark web to find the snuff films that supposedly this killer has made.
Good lord.
It is a very disturbing film,
Hmm.
but great film. I really like it. It is Julia Garepi does a great job. Who I believe she's making more of a mark in. She's about to start to do more English language things, I think.
Okay.
But someone I've seen in a couple French films, and I really enjoy her acting every time I see her.
Oh, cool. I don't know either of your films, so I'll definitely look those up. It's Montreal's also a city that I don't really know. I've been there, but I don't have a sense of it. I do need to go again. It's been a long time.
Yeah, I love Montreal. I used to love going there. Back when I was in college, I had several friends that were going to McGill and
Mhm.
Concordia and things like that. So it was very easy to hop over to visit them during my spring breaks and things like
Yeah,
that. And an excuse to party in Montreal, you don't really need one.
of course. I mean, it's where all of our male strippers in Canada come from. So of course I have to go there to be at the source.
Go to the Mecca.
That's right.
All right, Bill, those are our 10 cities and films that we picked from each of them. I know we probably each have a billion honorable mentions, so I don't think we need to name them.
Nope.
But were there any cities you think I missed in North America specifically that should have been ones that we could have talked about?
You could definitely do a section on Miami. I think that's an iconic cinematic city as well. Maybe Atlantic City as well. But you picked good ones. I don't think that you did wrong in any way. So yeah.
Oh, good. Thank you. Yeah, Miami was one I think I was sort of considering along with Philadelphia as
Hmm.
being the last entry.
Hmm.
I looked at stuff like
Hmm.
Seattle. Um, After that, it kind of gets tough because then you're more looking at states as a whole. They're not
Right.
really taking place in the city
Right.
specifically,
Yeah.
which sort of defeats the purpose because a lot of this list we were talking about, the iconic skylines and popular tourist
Hmm.
destinations and things like that become synonymous with the cities themselves.
Correct.
But I thought that was a great list, a great exercise as always. So Bill, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your picks with me today.
It was a pleasure, Dakota. I couldn't think of a better way to celebrate your birthday. It is an honor every time you ask me to be on the show. I have such a lovely time, and so yeah, thank you for having me.
Amazing. And I mentioned it off the top. You do host two podcasts. Where can people find those shows, and what do you have going on with them right now?
Well, thank you for asking. We have been doing bad game movies since 2013, and we're still going strong. I have a new episode coming out soon with my guest MJ Lyons. We're going to talk about the 2006 horror film The Covenant by Rennie Harlan, starring Taylor Kitsch and Chase Crawford and
Oh
Sebastian
boy.
Stan. Not as glorious an effort as his more recent oeuvre, but certainly one to be proud of. And my other and that is available wherever you get your podcasts. They're both of my podcasts are now Spotify podcasts. And then the other one is, as you mentioned, Riviera Rats, which is myself and my co-host Gregory Roseborough going through every year of the Cannes Film Festival. And because Greg and I both share a habit of making everything into homework, it's become us watching everything in the competition to decide what we think should have won the Palme d'Or. That wasn't the original concept for the show, but we're both insane. And there are times when I find myself watching a movie and thinking, why am I doing this to myself? But Greg is one of my favorite people in the world to talk to about movies, so it's a pleasure from beginning to end. We just recently released our episode on the 1973 festival, which was Scarecrow and the Hireling, and coming soon is the episode on the 1998 festival, which is when Angelopoulos's Eternity and a Day won the Palme d'Or.
I've told you this many times over messaging. I love Riviera Rats.
Oh,
It is
thanks.
a fantastic podcast. If you are a film nerd that loves the history of film, I think you guys do a great job of capturing what was going on within that given year.
Oh, thanks.
Obviously you're talking about the films, but you're talking about what's happening in the world as a whole, and I
Yeah.
think it really helps contextualize
Yeah,
everything.
we go through like
S-
events of the festival as well as like who was on the jury and other awards of that year to sort of put it in context as well. I'm really glad that people are enjoying it. We've had a lot of lovely feedback because every episode is about 2 hours long, but it only comes out like once a month, so spread out
Mhm.
over on a daily basis. It's not that much content, really.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'll say anyone that hasn't checked it out, your second to most recent episode, episode 21, which covered the 2025 awards,
Hmm.
uh, I think was one of the best podcast episodes I've ever
Oh,
listened to.
thank
It
you.
was just absolutely fantastic. The guest that you had on, who was there on the ground talking about his
Yes.
experience, and the questions that you guys asked, I think is the questions that any movie lover that is curious about Cannes would ask
Oh, that's
someone.
nice. Thanks. Yeah, Nicholas Bell, who writes for Ion Cinema. I've been internet friends with him for a long time. He's a wonderful guy. He's been on BGM a few times, and I always had it in my mind from the when we first started Riviera. I wanted to have him on to talk about firsthand experiences. And I was really touched when I told him about my idea for the show, and he was all for it, even though I said I've never been there. And he goes, "Well, that's okay. You're just talking about the movies, so you should do the show." I was really glad that he came on the show minutes after getting off a plane, coming home from the festival to talk to us about it, which was really cool.
I could sense the tiredness
Yeah,
and the exhaustion of spending 2+ weeks there
yeah.
in the south of France, and what that does to the body and soul. But I can still feel the passion.
Oh yeah.
When he was
Well, I
talking
mean,
about
you're the same.
watching.
You've come to TIFF and you've done other festivals where you watch like 5
Mm-hmm.
movies a day, and you
Mm-hmm.
want to die by the end of it. But then time passes and you want to do it again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very true. It's very true. Well, make sure you head over to ContraZoomPod.com, where you'll find recent reviews covering the Toronto Japanese Film Festival and the Imaginative Film Festival. And this has been a That Shelf podcast. Visit thatshelf.com for more great film discourse. Follow the show on Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads at ContraZoomPod. What are your favorite films by city? Let us know and send an email to ContraZoomPod@gmail.com. Thank you to Eric and Kevin Smale for the theme music and to Stephanie Pryor for the logo design. If you like to listen to podcasts on YouTube, we do post all episodes there as well. And if you really like the show, consider tipping us on coffee. Thanks for checking us out.